Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. The big story today is undoubtedly the escalating ceasefire violations both on the line of control and the international border. Why are they happening? Is there a message behind them? And how should the Indian government tackle this disturbing situation? Those are the key issues I shall discuss tonight with a special panel of guests whose expertise in this area is unrivaled. They are former Army Chief General Ved Prakash Malik, former GOC&C 15th Corps Lieutenant General Saeed Atta Hasnain, former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs Vivek Karju, and joining us from Islamabad, Pakistan's former High Commissioner to India, Aziz Ahmed Khan. Vivek Karju, before we discuss how the government should respond to the escalating ceasefire violations, let's spend a little time trying to understand why they're happening and what message they convey. What's your answer to that specific question?
Karan, I would like just half a minute to outline a certain framework before I answer that specific question. And in fact, within the framework, you will find the answer. I think Mr. Modi has set out separately, there hasn't been a consistent and comprehensive articulation, 4 points in his Pakistan policy till now. The first was witnessed during the Nawaz Sharif invitation, which is, we'd like cooperation with Pakistan, but that would be subject to norms.
The second?
The second is that internationalization does not worry us.
Third?
It does not worry us because he said this at the UN speech when he pointed to Mr. Nawaz Sharif and said that, do you think this will, you're raising Kashmir, do you think it will solve the problem? Third is that violence of any kind, whether across the LOC, terrorist violence or planting IEDs, will be responded to in kind.
And the fourth?
And the fourth is that diplomatic intercourse, diplomatic interaction will be subject to norms, and that was witnessed by his calling off the Foreign Secretary talks when the Pakistan High Commissioner met with the Hurriyat leaders.
So then in the context
I think
in the context that you set out for me, why do you think these violations are happening? Give me a quick answer to that.
No, yes, because the Pakistani army has been testing Mr. Modi from before he took oath, and they continue to test him. Okay. I put it to you that Pakistan will have to reconcile with the new paradigm that he's setting out, because it is entirely consistent with international norms of diplomatic and interstate intercourse and interaction.
You believe that the Pakistan army is testing Mr. Modi's mettle. Maybe, in fact, Mr. Karju believes that they're doing it to rattle him. Let me put another explanation to you and ask whether you think that carries water as well. As GOC&C 15th Corps, you know that every year in October, before the snow closes the passes, infiltration sharply picks up, and ceasefire violations are a way of covering support to that infiltration. Now, no doubt the ceasefire violations this year are on an escalated level. But is that still an explanation?
Well, to respond to that, Karan, the issue is, yes, this is a pattern every year, in October, November, awaiting the snows to come. But this year, something more is happening. First of all, the violations are much more stringent, much more in number. And if you see the military situation on ground in conjunction with the floods which have occurred, you got to read this situation correctly. Firstly, there's a very small footprint of terrorists inside the valley and south of Pir Panjal. It is important that the elections are going to come up. It's still not been decided when the elections are going to be. If at all the terrorists have to remain significant, and if the nexus from Pakistan has to remain significant, it is important to increase the boots on ground inside the valley and the south of
So then you do agree that this is happening because they're giving cover to infiltration of terrorists?
If you see the context, I just like to explain you in 30 seconds the context. If you see the last 1 month, 17 terrorists have been killed in 15 core zone in the valley. Not a single one south of the Pir Panjal. All the infiltration attempts were taking place in the north. They have failed. So there's an attempt now to force the issue south of the Pir Panjal.
Hence the ceasefire violations.
Absolutely.
General Malik, you believe that in fact the ceasefire violations are linked to Pakistan's attempt to focus attention on Kashmir. The speech made by Nawaz Sharif at the UN, the statements made by Bilawal Bhutto first in Multan, then more recently yesterday, even the statements made by their Foreign Office spokespersons. Can you explain why do you believe that the focus and stress on Kashmir is linked to these ceasefire violations?
You know, whatever is happening along the international border, that gives me the impression that Pakistan Army, who has apparently initiated all this, is doing it with a purpose to force India to resume talks. Because this kind of violence is unusual along the line, along the international border in Sialkot and Jammu sector, where there is a large population on either side of the border which is living there and which is cultivating land right up to the border. So in addition to whatever Atta has said, I totally agree with him, but I think there is a much larger agenda this time in which the Pakistan Army is in the driving seat, and along with internationalizing the Kashmir issue, bonding which is going on within Pakistan, drawing attention from their own domestic problems. The third is forcing India, trying to force India to resume talks at their behest, at their what they want, in whichever manner they want to do it. So I think all these things put together, this time they have opened a new strategy along the international border, which is not a good thing, because it will have a much larger collateral damage on either side.
Aziz Ahmed Khan, the view from India that is shared and echoed by not just General Malik but by many others is that this is an attempt by the Pakistan Army, maybe by the civilian government as well, to deliberately internationalize the Kashmir situation as a way and as a means of forcing Mr. Modi to talks. And this in a sense is supported by something Sartaj Aziz said in the official press statement he issued yesterday. To begin with, he began by blaming the Indian side for what he called 7 days of firing and shelling across the line of control, and then he pointedly added, the Indian side has shunned all our peace overtures. To many in India, that looks as if he's deliberately putting a spin to the world outside to say, look, India's ramping up the problem, India's creating a violent situation, India's doing the firing, and India also isn't talking, so that pressure then is brought to bear on India to sit down and talk. How do you respond to that interpretation?
Karan, number one, I don't think that at the moment it is in Pakistan's army's interest to open another front or create tensions on the eastern border when it is fully engaged in FATA and as well as on its western border. So they have already stretched their resources and they can't do that kind of a thing. Number two, these violations have killed 10 Pakistani civilians and wounded 40, and it has been there is no purpose for Pakistan to initiate this kind of a thing. Number three, as far as internationalizing the issue is concerned, this issue is an international issue. We want to resolve it through peaceful means, through dialogue and process, but the fact remains that the Kashmiris themselves draw attention to this issue. Next point that I would like to make is that, which was mentioned just now, that Pakistan is doing this to force India to the negotiating table or to resume the talks. I find it absolutely laughable, for the simple reason Pakistan is ready for talks. But if India is not willing to talk, not much will come out of it. In any case, if India doesn't wish to talk, so be it. We are happy here and they are happy there. I think the best thing in any case would be, as we had seen when the dialogue process had started in 2004, that there were no violations on the ceasefire line, the process was going on, there was an understanding being developed.
I want to stick for a moment to trying to understand why it's happening. I heard your riposte to the interpretation from the Indian side that this is being done to force India into talks. Before I go to Mr. Karchu, let me put to you what I thought was one very important part of that riposte from Aziz Ahmed Khan. He says the Pakistan Army doesn't have the time to create a flare-up on the eastern border because it is fully involved at the moment fighting its own insurgency in Waziristan. And therefore, the army would not open a second flank. To many who don't know the situation, they would say that looks like a very good argument. How do you respond to that? Because clearly, the Pakistan Army has to be involved in this attempt, if it is a credible interpretation, of forcing India to the talks.
Let me explain this to Aziz Saab on the other side. Firstly, inside Pakistan, you know, there are three situations which exist. Number one, there is the internal security situation in which you are battling the TTP. Secondly, you have a situation in Afghanistan where the vacation by the International Security Assistance Force is taking place, and Pakistan is seeking to occupy that space. And lastly is Kashmir. If you do not pay attention to Kashmir, your policy for the last 25 years to carry out the proxy war here is going to get diluted completely. It's important, therefore, for the Pakistan security establishment to ensure that from time to time, this kind of a reminder is sent, and the relevance of organizations like the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the United Jihad Council, all of them who are clamoring for this kind of a thing, that relevance is
You're saying a very important thing, General Hasnain. You're saying even though it's true, the Pakistan Army is involved with the TTP in North Waziristan, even though they're involved with the situation of Afghanistan, they always have time to concentrate on Kashmir, because Kashmir is central to their concerns. They can never be deflected from Kashmir.
That's right.
Therefore, the argument put in riposte by Aziz doesn't work with you, because Kashmir can never fall so low in their priority, they ignore it.
That's right. It's a question of reprioritization from time to time.
General Malik, let's come to some of the consequences of this attempt made by Pakistan to try and force India to the talks table. Firstly, does it not indicate that if Pakistan is steadily, willingly escalating ceasefire violations, it's not deterred by India's greater conventional military capability, nor is it worried that the situation could slip out of control to its disadvantage. It believes it has an opportunity to escalate ceasefire violations without worrying about the consequences. Isn't that one clear corollary of the situation?
Look, Karan, I'm quite convinced that both sides are watching the escalation ladder. And I have no doubt that neither Pakistan nor India would want it to go beyond a point along the escalation ladder. And therefore, sooner or later, you are bound to have talks to each other. You are bound to talk to each other either at the forces level or at the diplomatic level, and things will come under control. But at the moment, as Atta is saying, they have to highlight Kashmir, both domestically as well as in the international arena, and they have to make everyone relevant, including the separatists who are in Kashmir Valley. Even they have to be sent a message that you remain relevant as far as this problem is concerned. So I have no doubt that things will quieten down in the next few days to come. It will not be permitted to go out of control. But the unfortunate part is that whatever is happening even today will have much larger civilian casualties on either side than, say, what happened either in Kargil or what happens on the LOC in north of Pir Panjal.
Mr. Kharju, the second corollary of the present situation is that Pakistan is escalating the violence, if that interpretation is correct, and we've just lost Mr. Kharju at that point. Let me put that in a sense to you, Aziz Ahmed Khan. You're clearly escalating the violence if the interpretation in India that we are debating is correct, because you want to attract international attention. You're hoping that the Western world in particular will be worried when two nuclear power states start shooting at each other in an apparent uncontrolled fashion. You're hoping, therefore, for pressure from London, Washington and Moscow. So far, that pressure is not forthcoming. How long will you be prepared to continue ceasefire violations? How far will you escalate them to try and provoke Washington and London into stepping in?
Karan, I already explained that there is Pakistan at the moment. This escalation that you are accusing Pakistan of is not in Pakistan's interest, as I explained earlier. I think the best thing would be that when we give explanations, you don't believe us, we don't believe you. The best thing would be that we have the United Nations Military Observers Group, and they should be asked. They are present there. They should be asked and come and inspect and see who's violating. I think that otherwise we will never be able to convince each other.
Except that, as you know, India thinks India is irrelevant.
But
India has already decided that that particular observer group is irrelevant. It has nothing to do with it, and India has nothing to do with them. So you're suggesting a solution that is anathema to Indian eyes.
In such a situation, this is a reasonable solution. I mean, once this problem is resolved, then we can you can not accept it or anything. But at the moment, this is human lives are being lost, and constantly accusations are being made. I think it is better that the UNMOGIP inspects that and finds out who's violating the ceasefire.
Let's get out of UNMOGIP, because I think that's an issue that is beyond the scope of our discussion today. We have Mr. Karju back. I want to put that point to you, Mr. Karju. Pakistan is clearly hoping that they can internationalize the situation by worrying the Western world, who don't like the idea of two nuclear powers shooting at each other in an apparent uncontrolled fashion. Are you worried that if these ceasefire violations continue for much longer, and if the escalation which is happening also carries on, then there will be pressure from London, Washington, the UN, maybe even Moscow, on both sides to sit down and talk? And that's a pressure perhaps that we don't want on us.
Karan, I have no worries on this score. The international community has simply no appetite to get into an Indo-Pakistan matter, even including such a matter. Second, Mr. Modi has made it quite plain that he will not accept internationalization. He has said it from the forum of the United Nations General Assembly itself.
Yes, but that is no guarantee that he won't in the end have to buckle under pressure, Mr. Karju. Let's not take the words of a Prime Minister spoken in rhetoric so seriously. You and I know that Prime Ministers often have to do things they don't want to. Let's not exclude that possibility.
Karan, I have already told you, I see that civilians are being evacuated. Mr. Modi is not the kind of person who will buckle under pressure, if my reading of him is correct. But more than that, I find it simply laughable on the part of my good friend Aziz to say that Pakistan Army's actions are entirely consistent, rational and logical.
Well,
and his argument is they are already bogged down internally, and therefore they can't come in externally.
Let's not make this a personal exchange. People are entitled to their interpretations and views. Let's not mock them for it. Let's not mock them, Mr. Karju.
Okay, let me
Let's not mock them. I don't want this to become a tu-tu-meh-meh between India and Pakistan. I want it to be an analytical discussion where we try and understand what's happening.
I'm making a simple point.
Which is, quickly?
I'm just making a simple point. What about Kargil? Was Kargil a rational action? General Ved Malik is on your forum.
Okay.
Ask him whether
yes, but we're not going back to Kargil, Mr. Karju. Kargil is over and done with. We're talking about now. I want to try and look in the limited time left, General Malik, to what now happens, what the Indian government should do. On Monday, Home Minister Rajnath Singh said Pakistan must realize, and I'm quoting him, Bharat mein zamana badal gaya hai. But 48 hours have lapsed since Monday, and Pakistan clearly has either not heard that warning or it's ignoring it altogether, because Pakistan is stepping up the escalation, India is stepping up the escalation. So if this warning is not being heard, what next does the Indian government do?
You know, firstly, there is no doubt that this government believes in a more robust response to Pakistani violation along the line of control and international border, and that is what is happening. And I think there is an impression that Pakistan wants to resume talking to us with a pistol kept on our head, and that impression is what is making people, announce the kind of thing that you just now mentioned. I have no doubt that the large number of civilian casualties on either side will make the civilian political leadership see, and they will have to then come down to talking to each other either at the border post level or at the DGMO's level, and they will give them direction. Because this is an area which is definitely more sensitive than Kargil was.
Can I interrupt you there, General Saab? You're saying something very important which I think is critical. You said you have no doubt that escalating civilian casualties on both sides will force civilian politicians to have to sit down and talk, whether they do it in terms of military commanders talking, whether they do it in terms of diplomats or politicians. But if that happens, and if we still hold by the original interpretation that Pakistan is doing this to force India to talk, then won't Pakistan have succeeded? Admittedly, at the high cost of civilian casualties on both sides, but the conclusion is Pakistan will have succeeded.
No, that's not right. That will depend on who speaks to whom first. You know, these are political gimmicks that they will play, but the fact is that there will be a stage when both sides will maybe, talk indirectly and try and finish this matter wherever it is that time. This pressure from the civilian casualties on either side will not be tolerated before long.
Very quickly, General Saab, I want to put this to you. The Director General of the BSF has already said that India is retaliating strongly. But clearly, our strong retaliation isn't stopping the ceasefire violations happening provoked by the other side. Therefore, is there room for a further military heightening of the retaliation? Is there a higher level of response we can go to without accidentally slipping into war?
You see, Karan, there's a spectrum of response that you can have. And you can take it up to a level. At the moment, what is happening is that you are having exchanges of mortar fire across the IB and across the line of control. You can ratchet it up to artillery fire. I don't think we can go into the realm of cross LC kind of actions and things like that.
But it can get ratcheted up considerably.
It can go to that extent, but I would like to remind everyone that the 26th of November 2003 came the ceasefire. Prior to that, we didn't have a ceasefire. We can go back to that situation. The ceasefire can just vaporize. And we can go back to that situation without having any talks.
Mr. Kaju, I want to draw your attention to something that was in the leaders of two Indian papers today, which is in sharp contrast to our discussion. I'm talking of the Hindu and I'm talking of the Economic Times. Both of them called for urgent steps to save the ceasefire. I'm going to quote from the Hindu. The Hindu says, both sides need to restart the dialogue process urgently. It's only at the table that India can bring up the concern that truce violations are a cover for militant infiltration. More importantly, the paper adds, it's only by talking to Pakistan that India can ensure that the question of saving the truce remains strictly between them and by implication doesn't involve outsiders as Pakistan perhaps is trying to do. How do you respond to the advice of those papers? And do you think Mr. Modi, who may be taking a very different stand, might change his mind when he reads the papers?
No, I don't think Mr. Modi would or should change his mind. I have 2 points here to make. The first is, as I've said before, internationalization is no worries. He's made it plain and I think the country will stand by him. And the second point is that we are already talking. After all, the ceasefire is a military matter and the DGMOs are in contact. So therefore, all this talk of no dialogue does not hold water.
Okay.
The fact is that Mr. Modi is indicating clearly that that the normal norms have to be observed and that violence against our army, terrorist violence or violence against our civilians is not acceptable and will be responded in kind. The point General Malik is making is valid, that a civilian leadership and a democratically elected leadership is worried about civilian casualties. The same does not apply in Pakistan.
Well, no, let's not say it doesn't apply in Pakistan. That's an unfair imputation. Civilian politicians care about civilian casualties everywhere. Let's not descend to that level, Mr. Kaju. A quick last word to you, Aziz Ahmed Khan, because we're running out of time. You're clearly hearing from this studio discussion and from my guests that the Indian government and a vast section of Indian public opinion is of a mood to continue with these ceasefire violations because they do not believe that the time is right for talks. In fact, the government is letting it be known through sources that there will be no talks while the violations continue. Secondly, for talks to happen, even at the ground level of military commanders, they want the ceasefire violations to have ceased for 2 full days before they even agree to sector commanders talking. Are you in Pakistan prepared for the situation getting a lot worse before it starts to show any sign of improvement? A quick answer, because we're horribly out of time.
I would have been surprised if my friend Vivek had not said what he said. But having said that, I would say again that it is not in Pakistan's interests to heighten the tension on our eastern border. We would like the dialogue process this thing to resolve, but this does not mean that we are desperate for dialogue process. If India doesn't want the dialogue process, it's pointless to have that dialogue. So it would be childish to force India to come to the table, and I don't think anybody here is attempting to do that desperate. However, the military leadership can, the DGMOs can intensify their contact and at least try and control this situation.
Very quickly, you wanted 10 seconds. Dialogue, literally 10 seconds, General Hussain.
Right, Karan, I think we want to leave a thought for our future discussions. Important thing which we have not discussed at all and even looked at, the Al-Qaeda, the ISIS and the Lashkar-e-Taiba.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more.
And we need to have a complete discussion.
I'm stopping you because those are issues we raised 2 days ago when we in fact first came to this subject. Today, because the ceasefire violations have got worse and there's a danger of them escalating even further, I thought I'd concentrate narrowly on that. But you're absolutely right. Al-Qaeda, the blowback of terror from Afghanistan could make the situation in India much worse.
The relevance,
that is a nightmare that we have to send our audience to bed with. For tonight, I'm afraid we've gone as far as we can. My thanks to you for coming to studio. My thanks also to General Malik, Mr. Kharchu, as well as Aziz Ahmed Khan. And my apologies if a couple of times that OB line to Mr. Kharchu broke.